I try to keep things, for the most part, pretty common terms when I speak about finances on this channel. I try really hard not to use financial jargon as much as I can avoid it, so that people can get information that hopefully is understandable for them. But I'm gonna go ahead and explain a term in an attempt to help people understand an issue. So there is a financial term called regressive taxation, and regressive taxing is when that tax, it becomes more and more advantageous to the person the higher up they go in income bracket. So a normal taxation goal is to try to create a fairish system where, for the majority of part, no matter what your income is, you're getting hit by taxes in a way that will not create too much disparity. And that might be shocking for someone to hear, that tax systems actually do attempt to do that. They do a really poor job of it, but that is actually one of the goals in taxation, is for taxes to be fair. It unfortunately is easier done with some forms of taxation than others. For instance, a very regressive tax is taxes on products and goods. When we buy products and goods, as we go along and we pay taxes on these products and goods, having to buy more of them or having to buy lots, over and over again repeatedly, creates a problem where the lower your income is, the more taxes you end up paying on products and goods in the long run. If you have a lot of income, disposable income, all of that, you get to a point where you're spending less and less of it on random stuff. It's a known phenomenon. It's a known issue. On top of that, you're buying stuff less often because you buy better quality stuff. And so you end up actually having a regressive tax system in the way that items are taxed in the United States. A person who is wealthier pays less tax overall than, percentage-wise, than a poor person on goods and services. Regressive taxation is applicable in other areas. There are other kinds of taxes that end up being this way. But something that doesn't get talked about that much, because the majority of the income that the country gets is from income taxes. So income taxes are from individuals paying their income taxes. Like, over half of our taxes that the government uses to take care of government spending for stuff like military, the function of the actual government itself, welfare programs, social security programs, all that kind of stuff, that's all, like, half of it funded by income tax. They really focus a lot in the IRS with their limited budget on pounding income tax, because that's where the majority of money comes from. But in actuality, it's not where the most potential money could come from. And something that really frustrates me is we have these ladders that can be climbed up of taxation, these tax brackets, and we climb up them. As we gain more money, we get taxed at a different percent, and it gets higher the higher up you go in income. But it doesn't matter, because the majority of people who are that high in income, most of their money is in assets. So it doesn't really matter. They're still making bank. That higher tax rate hardly affects them at all after a certain point. Also, that higher tax rate stops way too soon at way too low of an income, and people who earn millions and billions, they are taxed at the same rate as someone who is taxed for having like 600,000 and stuff like that. So that is ridiculous to me. But even besides all of that, what's the most ridiculous thing to me is corporations are just taxed at a flat percentage. And that percentage can be brought down by deductions, things that help, them to write off some of those taxes, business expenses, charitable donations, so on and so forth. They can bring that tax rate down, but it doesn't go up. So corporations who make billions a year and corporations who make millions a year pay the exact same tax rate. That's mind-boggling to me. And they get to do a bunch of business write-offs for purchases they're making. That turns into basically a lot of corporations being able to get away with zero tax. This system is non-functional, in my opinion. Corporations being able to do that at all, to me, is a massive regression for all American citizens. It doesn't matter who you are being harmed by a major business not having to pay tax and you having to pay tax. You are being harmed by the fact that they have a set rate of tax and yours fluctuates depending on what you have. You are being harmed by them being able to just write off, that truck purchase, or this business trip. And you, meanwhile, have to pay, if you get a vehicle, you have to pay tax on a trip. You're paying for the good, you're paying for the service, and on top of that, you're paying the taxes on the goods, on the services. They don't have to pay the taxes on it. It's a purely regressive taxation system for corporations, for businesses. And people talk a lot about, billionaires and rich people. And my focus really is on corporate expenditure and, quite frankly, corporate benefits that they get that normal people don't. One of the most terrible things in the world to me is that corporations are viewed as personhood holding in the United States. I think that's absolutely horrifyingly bad. They don't get the same consequences and repercussions as a person, but they get all the rights of a person. Corporations can donate to political stuff, super PACs, all that. Corporations can get away with a lot of things because they're considered people. Corporations can hold patents even to seeds and life. It's terrible. It's absolutely atrociously bad. It reduces intellectual property. It reduces creativity. It creates consolidation of brands and reduces competition in the market and vast monopolies, global empires of corporate nonsense. To me, the worst kind of people in the world are not necessarily the guy who stole a candy bar from Walmart. To me, the worst kind of people in the world are CEOs and corporate bigwigs sitting on boards of directors at businesses. And I've seen before movements be like, we need more people of color to be in those kinds of positions. We need more women to be in those kinds of positions. No, the opposite is true. The reason those positions exist is because those people are not good people for the majority part. Every once in a while, one of them accidentally ends up there who's not purely greedy and non-empathetic to the plights of other human beings. But for the most part, the majority of those people, and I've met some of them, literally shook hands with them, they are very single-mindedly only interested in profit. The suffering of the planet or of people or of animals, plants, whatever it is, they don't care. It is not on their radar except as a PR issue. They just don't think about it at all. It does not occur to them. So no, I don't want more people to end up in those positions. I want less people to end up in those positions. I would prefer those positions to not even exist, because I would prefer corporations to be handled far differently than how they currently are. Like, if we get down to it, in reality, a corporation has no feelings. It has no ability to feel. It's a little bit getting into philosophy here. Basically, there is a concept that religion or government or the market are things that humans invented to be a more idealized version of something that we lacked, and then we ended up serving the thing we invented, and that sucks because now we're a slave to something that's not even real, that we conceptualized. And so we become very attached to our country, very nationalist. But the country is an invented thing. It's temporary. It's not like it's been there for all of the, universal history. And instead of respecting life, we start to respect invented things, the fake thing. And we've done that with corporations, with consumerism, with commodifying everything, including ourselves. And it causes massive regressive tactics and massive regression in finances, period. And that regression causes oppression. It is a system that is in place that is causing a unavoidable oppression of certain groups so that there is a benefit to corporations. The corporate power structures that are in place can benefit whoever is in charge of them. And there are some people of color and some women and things like that, people who, maybe more traditionally were in minorities and not able to get into any kind of powerful position. There are people who have jumped up into those positions and they're not becoming a better person by doing that. But they have this misconception that by getting into that place, they're representing and they're getting wealthier and all of this stuff, and that's great. When in actuality, it's terrible. It is regressive. I wish fervently for the day when people view being some corporate bigwig with just as much disgust and just as much repulsion as someone being a cruel dictator, that they view it with the same understanding as a terrorist, that they understand that a terrorist, we view them as so bad, they go in and they bomb somewhere, and that is bad. It's terrible. Say the terrorist killed 100 people with their bomb. That's awful. That's truly bad. But the top worst pollution generating corporations, just the top 100, have killed millions of people and will kill millions more even if they stopped producing emissions today. The damage they have done will last so long that millions more will die. And it's not even just people. They've killed plants, animals. Animals have gone into endangered or extinction status just from the top 100 worst corporations. The number one thieves, the number one people who steal and steal by billions are corporations. The ones who create a non-livable situation where humans can't meet their basic human needs are a corporation. So it's difficult for me to give corporations a pass. And quite frankly, corporations aren't a person. It is a lot harder for me to judge a single person. Individual people, they make mistakes, stuff happens. They might not want that mistake to happen. They might not mean for it to be that way. And they are capable of being sorry, of changing, of learning and growing and developing as a person throughout their life. A corporation's just a corporation. It is an amalgamation of profit-seeking, greed, algorithms, and workers. It doesn't have emotions. It doesn't learn from its mistakes. It learns how to get more profit. That's about it. It doesn't care about helping society. It could care less about the community it's in or the damage it does. It has no emotions. It has no capacity to become a better person because it's not a person. Corporations benefit from regressive tax systems, and corporations encourage regressive tax systems. Corporations spend ridiculous amounts of money lobbying for things that will benefit them going forward. And corporations, quite frankly, can afford to do so with all that money that they're not getting taxed. And even if they were paying tax, it's just a flat rate, no matter how big and powerful it is. That's not how individuals get taxed. It is such a conundrum that corporations are ever have been granted personhood status in the first place, to me, because they're not a person, and it's hard to apply things to a corporation that you would apply to a person. If a person committed the kinds of crimes that corporations did, that person would probably have already had the death sentence, but the corporation just gets away with it. We actually bail out a lot of corporate structures and banks and stuff like that. We literally pay extra taxes to pay for them to continue to exist when they make bad decisions. They don't pay for their mistakes, we do. The people, the actual human beings. All the workers who don't get a livable wage pay for the mistakes of the corporation. All the people who are dealing with regressive systems and who are being oppressed pay for the mistakes of the corporations. The corporation isn't a person, so it can't pay for its own mistakes. So of course it shirks the responsibility and it pushes that onto other people. If somehow in my lifetime I can help to change the statutes and regulations that give corporate personhood a status to a company, I will have done something worthwhile in my life just by that, all by itself. The people who run corporations are not elected officials, but they make decisions that affect people's lives more than an elected official does. They can make a decision that affects workers in multiple countries all at once. The government, it makes decisions solely based on the people in its own country. And there are people who say, oh, well, it creates more jobs. But how good are the jobs if you don't even get a livable wage? There are people who say, oh, well, it makes more like ingenuity and people inventing things. But the invention isn't real invention. It's just, how can this create more profit for this company? If it doesn't create more profit for this company, then it's not worth inventing. So it actually restricts creativity and invention. It keeps the broadness of what invention could be and ingenuity could be completely restricted down. It's just not worth it, in my opinion. It needs to change. And unfortunately, laws and statutes tend to protect normalcy and not actually pursue justice, especially when it comes to things like taxation. There are so many taxes, it's ridiculous in the United States. And part of why is because it's actually really hard to get rid of an old tax. So they just keep inventing new ones, because the ways to get rid of something old and outdated are so difficult that it's easier to just make more and more and more. So the tax system in this country, unfortunately, just gets more and more complicated. And there are people who want it to be more simplified. In order for it to be more simplified, corporations would have to actually start being the majority share of taxes the country gets, instead of individual people being the majority of taxes that the country gets. And secondly, the way that it is simplified would have to create those fair and equitable standards that taxation does actually attempt to do. That's very difficult when financial disparity has such massive wealth gap. The difference between a person who earns less than $600 a year and the person who earns, billions and billions is so astronomically huge from a numbers standpoint that having some sort of way to balance that is not realistic, because there's such extremes. And so even though both of those things are real, they exist in the United States. Like right now, they're such extremes that it's hard to create a system that could create some sort of fairness. But it would be much more difficult for billionaires to hoard that much money if they couldn't constantly put everything into companies to hold money, couldn't constantly put everything into trusts to hide money, couldn't possibly put things wherever they feel like to hide money. Having a global company means that you can put your money somewhere else where you don't feel like giving it to the country that you started in. There's lots and lots of options for a billionaire, and there's basically no options for the person who has no money. That person has to keep buying product at a regressive tax rate, has to keep buying the worst of things, the things that will break and then they'll have to replace it as soon as possible. They are stuck. They are oppressed by the system itself, by the way things are designed, because it's regressive.